ahora.
Bien, el presidente Gabriel Boric ya está en suelo canadiense para iniciar su gira por Norteamérica y estamos con imágenes en vivo y estamos en contacto con Kevin Felgueras, que está justamente siguiendo los pasos del mandatario. Kevin, buenos días.
Sí, Carla, Gustavo, ¿cómo están? Muy buenos días. Justamente ustedes ven al mandatario Gabriel Boric Font bajando de este avión de la FACH que nos trajo justamente desde suelo chileno hasta Ottawa, Canadá. Está siendo recibido a esta hora de la mañana por Mona Fortier, que es la presidenta del Consejo del Tesoro, también Soraya Martínez, que es miembro del Parlamento y secretaria parlamentaria de Vivienda, Diversidad e Inclusión, y también Michael Gort, que es embajador de Canadá en nuestro país. Son las personas que lo reciben en esta alfombra roja en su llegada a suelo canadiense en el inicio de esta su segunda gira internacional. Esta es la primera por suelo norteamericano. Precisamente estará durante toda esta jornada aquí en Canadá, en Ottawa, la capital de este país, reuniéndose con Justin Trudeau, el primer ministro canadiense, a eso de las 10 de la mañana. Posteriormente se va a reunir con chilenos que residen en este país. Tendrá incluso esta noche una reunión informal en un restaurante junto al primer ministro canadiense, una cita muy importante entendiendo la alianza político-estratégica que busca realizar el presidente Gabriel Boric con este país. Después, a eso de las 9 de la noche, despegará nuevamente este avión de la FACH rumbo a Los Ángeles, Estados Unidos, para la 9ª edición de la Cumbre de las Américas, primera participación del mandatario en un foro internacional de esta categoría. Ustedes lo ven, una comitiva amplia de vehículos que va a llevar al presidente de la República a un hotel y posteriormente a la reunión con el primer ministro canadiense Justin Trudeau. De allí, obviamente, nosotros nos vamos a mover desde este aeropuerto hacia ese mismo hotel para continuar con esta agenda que contempla además la firma de un documento, de un memorándum de entendimiento sobre cooperación e igualdad de género y empoderamiento de las mujeres, y declaración conjunta de prensa de los líderes a eso de las 11 de la mañana. Por ahora la agenda se está cumpliendo a cabalidad. Estaba presupuestado el aterrizaje a las 7 de la mañana, llegamos a eso de 5 para las 7 y de aquí en adelante la agenda no para hasta el viernes en la noche, cuando el presidente de la República emprende de nuevo vuelo hacia suelo nacional, muchachos.
Kevin, dentro de las actividades que tú mencionabas, también tiene una muy importante, ¿no? Una reunión que va a sostener el presidente de nuestro país con importantes empresarios, ¿no? De aquel país, ¿no? De Canadá.
Así es. Sí, justamente es una de las razones por las que está presente también en esta gira el ministro de Economía y la canciller Antonia Urrejola. Es la búsqueda de inversión para nuestro país, generar certidumbre. Ayer tuvimos una conversación con el presidente de la República en el avión, también con ambos ministros de Estado, quienes aseguraban que esta gira tiene esa característica de dar certidumbre a las inversiones extranjeras para que se mantengan en nuestro país. Nos decía el ministro de Economía que Estados Unidos y Canadá son dos de los países con mayor inversión en nuestro país y por lo tanto sellar alianzas comerciales, darles certidumbres, también entendiendo el proceso constitucional, es clave. Ustedes lo ven, se empieza a retirar la comitiva donde va el presidente de la República, Gabriel Boric, en su inicio de esta, la segunda gira presidencial, la primera por tierras norteamericanas. Recordemos, la primera fue hace cerca de 2 meses hasta Argentina, junto a Alberto Fernández, con quien se va a reunir probablemente en los próximos días en estas reuniones bilaterales que se tendrán en el marco de la Cumbre de las Américas. Esta es una visita previa a suelo canadiense, donde se espera, por cierto, estas reuniones con empresarios y también con el primer ministro Justin Trudeau, con quien va a pasar gran parte de la jornada realizando estas reuniones y también lo que va a hacer, por cierto, esta reunión informal. Nosotros, muchachos, nos vamos a dar vueltas junto a Juan Pablo Muñoz porque tenemos que tomar las maletas, tomar nuestras cosas y literal movernos hacia la van que nos va a llevar a este hotel para continuar con la agenda del presidente de la República, Gabriel Boric Font, durante esta jornada acá en suelo canadiense.
Muy bien, Kevin Felgueras. Sí, vaya nomás. Allá, bueno, 7:15 de la mañana, tienen la misma hora en la capital canadiense, ahí en Ottawa. Abrazo, Kevin. Luego establecemos nuevo contacto contigo.
ahora.
Y volvemos a Ottawa, lugar donde es el primer destino de las visitas que tiene el presidente Gabriel Boric y la comitiva chilena. Vamos con todos los detalles de lo que sucede a esta hora. Está Kevin Felgueras. Kevin.
Justamente, Nicolás, estamos a la espera que el presidente de la República arribe hasta acá, hasta el Parlamento canadiense. Entendemos que vendrá caminando. De hecho, vemos a lo lejos una comitiva importante. Entendemos que allí viene. Será una caminata, tal como se los habíamos adelantado en el primer despacho. Vemos, de hecho, una comitiva importante caminando y también una comitiva de vehículos. Así que estamos ahí viendo. Se nos había confirmado que era caminando, pero esto puede ir cambiando. Ustedes lo ven en las imágenes de Juan Pablo Muñoz. Al parecer finalmente será de manera en vehículo para esta reunión. Lo importante de esta reunión es, Nicolás, que en los próximos minutos se reunirá justamente el presidente de la República, Gabriel Boric, su par, el primer ministro de Canadá, Justin Trudeau. Nos vemos en las imágenes, Nico, una comitiva importante. Sin embargo, por el otro lado vemos otra comitiva importante. Juan Pablo, te pido que te puedas voltear porque entendemos que ahí al fondo está el presidente de la República. Estamos junto a incluso una chilena residente, entendemos, en Canadá. Juan Pablo, están llegando vehículos y por el otro lado alcanza a ver bien el presidente de la República. Vamos a esperar un par de segundos. Lo importante, Nico, que te decía que esta reunión se va a desarrollar en unos minutos, una reunión bilateral entre el primer ministro de Canadá, Justin Trudeau, y el presidente de la República, Gabriel Boric, que entendemos viene caminando por el otro sector. No sé si Juan Pablo... le vamos a pedir a Juan Pablo que cruce acá porque efectivamente finalmente llegaba caminando, al parecer, el presidente de la República. Han sido definiciones de última hora, justamente. Vamos a esperar. Ahí viene el presidente, viene de camisa azul. Mira, nos vamos a acercar, Juan Pablo, porque hay una chilena que lo está esperando hace mucho rato. Vino de hecho con su nieta. Vamos a ver si es que se acerca a saludarla. A ver.
Soy de Chile y apruebo. Eso, pero venga, quiero sacarme una foto con usted, por favor.
Va a venir a saludarla.
Sí. Gracias, presidente. Un sueño cumplido verlo. Una maravilla.
¿Estaba tan lejos?
Sí. Vine a ver a Letitis, que me mandó el saludo de Montreal, ¿te acuerdas?
Muchas gracias.
Ando con la hija de ella, mi nieta.
Un gusto.
¿Qué espera esta reunión? ¿Cómo se siente?
¿Nos está esperando? Vamos a hablar a la salida, pero no me cabe ninguna duda de que vamos a poder consolidar el liderazgo de Chile a nivel internacional en conjunto con los principios que compartimos con Canadá, pero conversamos a la salida.
Muy bien, ahí estaban declaraciones del presidente de la República, Gabriel Boric, en su llegada al Parlamento. Lo hizo finalmente caminando y teníamos a esta ciudadana chilena residente acá que, bueno, hacía ahí su pronunciamiento con respecto al plebiscito constitucional del próximo 4 de septiembre. Movámonos un poco, Juan Pablo, para ver la entrada del presidente de la República. Vamos de hecho, a conversar. Disculpe, estamos en vivo para Canal 24 Horas de Chile. ¿Cuál es su nombre?
María Aurora Campos.
María Aurora, usted saludó al presidente de la República. ¿Usted vive acá en Canadá?
No, yo vivo en Chile.
Ah, perfecto.
Pero estoy visitando a mis hijos y a mis nietos acá, a Lautaro, mi nieto que tiene 7 días. Así es que vine porque realmente tenía que estar para el nacimiento de mi último nieto y son 3.
¿Y se enteró que venía el presidente de casualidad?
Sí, yo sabía que venía. Entonces me vine con mi nieta desde Montreal hasta Ottawa.
Ahí se vinieron hoy.
Hoy día.
¿Solo para esto?
Solo para esto, por supuesto. Si en Chile no hay ninguna posibilidad de verlo, claro, y menos de abrazarlo.
Y quedó contenta, mi mamá.
Feliz, feliz.
Muy bien, muchas gracias.
Encantada.
Que esté muy bien.
Encantada.
Bueno, ahí estaba entonces la ciudadana chilena que justo estaba acá en Canadá. Nosotros nos vamos a mover, Nicolás, para mostrarles. Estamos en las afueras del Parlamento, el presidente sigue caminando. Llegó como muy pocas veces se puede ver en Chile. caminando hasta el Parlamento. Allá lo ven ustedes siendo recibido por una comitiva importante. Venía también junto a esta comitiva la ministra de Relaciones Exteriores, Antonia Urrejola, y ahí lo ven ustedes, vemos solamente las espaldas, por el otro lado no se podía acceder. Acá la seguridad es bastante estricta, aunque no es tampoco mayoritaria como se ve en otros sectores. Ahí está, la entrada al Parlamento canadiense del presidente de la República, Gabriel Boric, quien se dio el tiempo de poder saludar a una ciudadana chilena que estaba acá en Canadá, y en los próximos minutos entonces se desarrolla esta primera reunión bilateral entre el primer ministro canadiense Justin Trudeau y el presidente de la República, Gabriel Boric. Luego se juntan con empresarios, con el ministro de Economía, para luego firmar un acuerdo y posteriormente en la tarde van a tener más reuniones en este que es recién el inicio de esta gira por Norteamérica, Nico.
Las primeras actividades del presidente Boric y también palabras, vamos a estar atentos a la salida, podría también tener declaraciones luego de esta, bueno, hay una declaración conjunto en todo caso con Justin Trudeau, el primer ministro de Canadá, que por supuesto vamos a seguir contigo allá. Gracias, Kevin, un abrazo, nos vemos.
I have to say that Canada and Chile have had a long-standing positive relationship, but today President Boric and I really reaffirmed that it's also a friendship. At a time like this, with so much instability around the world, the challenges of the pandemic, the challenges of the fight against climate change, the challenges of global conflict, and tremendous issues as we see authoritarian states rise and democracies backslide in some cases, it's so important to be celebrating and welcoming the arrival of a strong, progressive voice on the world stage. It is great news for Chile. It's great news for Canada to have such a strong partner at the other end of the continent. But it's really important as well that we continue to add to the strong voices around the world fighting for democracy, for human rights, combating threats to our institutions and stability, aligned on climate change, on gender equality, on inclusion, on the kinds of things we know don't just make life easier and better for all of our citizens, but also lead to better economic growth. We talked about a lot of these things, and as I think people know, we're tremendously aligned. We even got into the challenges of gun violence and how Canada has moved forward recently on stronger gun control and some of the challenges that Chile is facing as well. So I'm very, very excited to be welcoming you, Gabriel, here to Ottawa on this first big trip outside your region. That you chose to come to Canada really reinforces not just the 80 years of friendship between our countries and 25 years of trade, but of free trade, but the strong, anchored reality of values that we share from across the Americas. As we continue to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic, we're both focused on building economies that create jobs and opportunities for everyone. Discussing trading opportunities that can create growth and good jobs for both of our countries was something that we did. For 25 years, the Canada-Chile Free Trade Agreement has provided opportunities for businesses and workers, and we look forward to continuing and deepening that relationship and friendship. We're committed to creating new opportunities for Canadian and Chilean businesses and entrepreneurs, helping them reach new markets and customers, which is good for our economy and ensures that Canada stays competitive when it has access to economies around the world, like strong economies in South America. As our economies recover and grow, we need to ensure that it does so in a way that brings everyone along. Le Conseil des ministres du Canada et celui du Chili sont tous les deux composés d'au moins 50% de femmes. Et aujourd'hui, on a conclu une entente pour continuer d'avancer dans la bonne direction. Today, we are announcing an agreement to promote gender equality and empower women in all parts of our societies, including supporting policies that ensure women's inclusion in COVID-19 economic recovery efforts, representation in leadership positions, wage parity, addressing gender-based violence, and more. We know that securing a strong economic future requires us to take climate action and protect the environment as partners and friends. That's exactly what we're doing. Today, Canada committed to co-sponsoring the Americas for the Protection of the Ocean Declaration with Chile. Canada and Chile are both ocean countries. We know healthy oceans are critical for jobs, for communities, and for fighting climate change. Today's announcement is about how we keep the Pacific Ocean healthy, from protecting migratory routes for sea animals to preserving delicate coastal ecosystems. On travaille aussi ensemble afin de promouvoir un autre outil pour lutter contre les changements climatiques et stimuler la croissance économique, le prix sur la pollution. En novembre, pendant la COP26, j'ai invité les autres pays à faire en sorte que 60% des émissions mondiales soient couvertes par un régime de prix sur la pollution d'ici 2030. Aujourd'hui, le Canada et le Chili sont formellement engagés à collaborer pour atteindre cet objectif. Canada and Chile both have a price on pollution, and in Canada, our system puts more money back into the pockets of a majority of Canadian families. A strong plan to fight climate change keeps our air clean and is critical to creating jobs and growth. By building a fairer and better future, we're helping strengthen the foundations of our democracies. Stronger democracies are in everyone's interest as we look to the forces that seek to threaten the fundamental rights and freedoms of our citizens. Both of our countries are committed to promoting and protecting democracy at home, across our hemisphere, and around the world. We're committed to defending human rights, freedom, equality, and combating threats to our institutions and society. We welcome Chile joining the Freedom Online Coalition, which supports internet freedom worldwide. And together, we strongly condemn Putin's ongoing unjustified and horrific attacks on Ukraine. We stand with Ukraine and remain steadfast in our support for its sovereignty and for the rights of Ukrainians to choose their own future. President Boric, Gabriel, I'm honored to welcome you today. Thank you for choosing Canada, but mostly thank you for the work you do in bringing our countries together and making sure that our voice resonates strongly together on the world stage. I look forward to the work we will do together to advance progressive policies as like-minded partners at the Summit of the Americas in LA this week, but also in the months and indeed in the years to come. Merci, mon ami. Bienvenue.
Merci beaucoup, Premier ministre. Je suis très heureux d'avoir l'opportunité d'être ici au Canada. I'm really happy to be here in Canada and all my country. It's really honored the receiving that you've gave us. I'm going to deliver this press conference in Spanish so the people in our country can also be part of it, of this friendship that we are reinforcing now. Hoy día nos hemos reunido con el primer ministro Justin Trudeau y con una delegación de su gobierno para mirar juntos desde el sur del mundo hasta el norte los valores que nos unen. Y esos valores compartidos que hoy día en un mundo que cambia tan rápido es tan importante relevar son la lucha por un crecimiento que sea inclusivo, que respetando y creyendo en la ciencia se haga cargo de la crisis climática que nosotros, los seres humanos, hemos provocado y por lo tanto trabajar en conjunto diversas iniciativas que apunten hacia un desarrollo que sea medioambientalmente sostenible en el tiempo. Hemos firmado con nuestras cancilleres y ministra de la Mujer de Canadá también un entendimiento respecto a la promoción justamente de las mujeres en la política y en la sociedad. Y hemos conversado detalles sobre, por ejemplo, la política de restricción de armas que se ha venido impulsando en Canadá desde hace bastante tiempo, que ha tenido muy buenos resultados y que en Chile queremos justamente también imitar, porque las buenas ideas es bueno replicarlas en nuestros países. Hemos hablado también sobre la importancia que le damos a la defensa irrestricta de los derechos humanos, en donde no se puede permitir que estos se pongan en cuestión según el color del gobierno que los vulnere. Y así, desde el sur y desde el norte, desde el hemisferio sur y desde el hemisferio norte, decimos con mucha fuerza, Chile y Canadá, que vamos a levantar nuestras voces desde el continente americano para que todos los países del mundo respeten íntegramente la Declaración Universal de Derechos Humanos. Estoy también contento porque hemos hablado de economía. Con Canadá tenemos un acuerdo hace 25 años que queremos seguir profundizando y en donde empresas canadienses van a seguir trabajando y generando valor en nuestro país, y le hemos dicho al primer ministro que esperamos que lo hagan con estándares canadienses, porque lo que se exige acá en Canadá lo queremos exigir también en Chile. Queremos subir los estándares medioambientales, queremos generar un crecimiento y desarrollo inclusivo, y para eso vamos a trabajar unidos. Hoy día hemos ratificado no solamente estos valores compartidos, sino una amistad que es más profunda, y ponemos a disposición también del mundo el liderazgo con el cual nuestros países nos han honrado para emprender una tarea que es difícil, pero urgente, que es la defensa de nuestros océanos, la protección de nuestros océanos. Chile es pionero en las áreas marinas protegidas. Durante el mandato del primer ministro Justin Trudeau se ha avanzado en Canadá al pasar del 1% de área marina protegida a cerca de 15% hoy día, y se espera avanzar aún más en los próximos años. Y queremos invitar al mundo, en particular a toda la costa pacífico, a unirse a este reto que tiene tanto que ver justamente también con la justicia climática. Proteger a nuestros ecosistemas, proteger nuestros océanos, tener un modo de desarrollo sustentable, un nuevo modelo de desarrollo, es proteger la vida en nuestros países. Y eso vale tanto en Canadá como en Chile. Con este hito vamos a continuar colaborando también y apoyándonos mutuamente en diversos espacios multilaterales que son estratégicos para la investigación, programas de movilización de conocimientos, campañas mediáticas y participación comunitaria, especialmente sobre temáticas de género, y también algo en lo que con Canadá tenemos en común, que es una nueva relación con los pueblos indígenas. En Canadá, tal como en Chile, han habido momentos difíciles. El mismo primer ministro habló incluso de genocidio. Y para que esas heridas sanen se requiere reconocimiento y un nuevo trato, que tiene que ver justamente con cómo se integran a las comunidades indígenas, a las primeras naciones, a el desarrollo al que todos aspiramos. Y de eso Chile, como ustedes bien saben, no está exento, y vamos a compartir las experiencias que sean valiosas para poder avanzar sobre ello. Espero, primer ministro Trudeau, que sigamos avanzando juntos en esto, que temas tan importantes como el control de armas, que nos inspira para tener sociedades más pacíficas, que temas tan importantes como el combate a la crisis climática que nosotros hemos provocado, el crecimiento inclusivo, el respeto irrestricto a los derechos humanos, sean contagiosos además para otros países de la región, y es lo que vamos a decir conjuntamente, como socios y como amigos, en la Cumbre de las Américas a desarrollarse durante la próxima semana en Los Ángeles, Estados Unidos. Muchísimas gracias por este recibimiento, muchísimas gracias por las posibilidades que se nos abren también de inversión en Canadá. Muchísimas gracias por esta amistad que sabemos va a redituar en beneficio no de tú ni de mí, sino de los habitantes de nuestro pueblo, que es para quienes finalmente trabajamos. Un abrazo grande a ti y a todo tu pueblo.
Thank you. The Prime Minister and President, will now take questions from media. Le Premier ministre et le Président vont maintenant prendre des questions des médias. It will be 2 questions from Chilean media and 2 questions from Canadian with follow-ups. Please identify your name and outlet. S'il te plaît, vous identifiez avec votre nom et bureau. Nous allons maintenant commencer avec la première journaliste. We will now start with the first journalist.
Buenas tardes. Primer ministro Trudeau, después de las conversaciones que ha tenido con el presidente Gabriel Boric, ¿cómo ve el proceso constituyente chileno, las reformas también que va a impulsar el actual gobierno? ¿Considera usted que sigue siendo Chile un socio confiable para las inversiones canadienses, considerando también las inquietudes que han manifestado particularmente desde el sector minero en Canadá?
First and foremost, this is obviously a decision for the Chilean people, and I know they have important democratic processes underway. But let me highlight that the world is changing, and we have to make sure, all of us, as governments, as leaders, that our institutions and our democracies can keep up with the changes in the world. And one of the most important changes is a recognition that fighting against climate change, making sure economic growth benefits everyone, including women, including Indigenous people in the pathway, is a really important thing. It's important morally, but it's also important practically. You cannot grow a strong, resilient economy in the 21st century unless you are also protecting the environment, unless everyone has a chance to participate, unless you are including people who've been excluded. That's the only way to build a strong future and a strong country, and that's something certainly that Canada has always put into practice over the past years.
Glenn McGregor, CTV News. A question for both you, the Prime Minister, and Mr. President, about the White House decision to exclude Nicaragua, Cuba, and Venezuela from the Summit of Americas this week. Do you support that decision? And if not, do you feel it's incumbent on Canada to forcefully protest that decision, particularly given Canada's relationship with Cuba?
Canada, of course, looks forward to participating fully in the Summit of the Americas. It's extremely important that we have an opportunity to engage with our fellow hemispheric partners, some like-minded, some less like-minded, but talking about the important issues that our people have in common, whether it's migration pressures, whether it's climate change, whether it's coming through this pandemic. This is an important moment for us to gather. On Venezuela, Canada has been one of the strongest countries in coming out strongly as a part of the Lima Group, as a leader on pushing back against the illegitimate Maduro regime, the human rights abuses, and quite frankly, the migration crisis that is causing so much challenge in and across South America. These are things that Canada has taken strong positions on, and even in regards to Cuba, we continue to stand up strongly for human rights and democracy, even as we recognize that Canada has a long-standing approach to Cuba that is different from the United States. Je vais souligner que c'est important que le Canada participe pleinement au Sommet des Amériques. C'est une occasion pour nous d'engager avec nos partenaires de la région, certains avec lesquels on est d'accord, certains avec lesquels on a plus de différences, mais évidemment, nous allons être là pleinement. Par rapport au Venezuela, ça fait longtemps que le Canada condamne le régime illégitime de Nicolás Maduro pour son abus des droits humains, des principes démocratiques, mais aussi pour cette crise de migration extrêmement difficile qui frappe très, très fort en Amérique du Sud. Nous continuons d'avoir des préoccupations énormes à ce niveau-là. Par rapport à Cuba, on a toujours été là pour se tenir droit et fort, pour défendre les droits humains, pour pousser pour plus de démocratie, mais on reconnaît que le Canada a toujours eu une approche différente sur Cuba que les États-Unis.
Yo concuerdo con lo que ha señalado el primer ministro Justin Trudeau. Y vamos a la Cumbre de las Américas con la convicción de que es los espacios de diálogo multilateral aquellos que nos van a permitir construir mejores relaciones entre nuestros países, en donde, lo hemos dicho hasta el cansancio, nadie se va a salvar por sí mismo. sino que tenemos que unirnos para tener mejores desarrollos en nuestras naciones. Por lo tanto, también nos sentimos con el derecho a expresar aquí en Estados Unidos y donde sea que la exclusión no es el camino, que no ha dado resultados históricamente y que cuando Estados Unidos pretende excluir a determinados países, finalmente lo que hace es reforzar la posición que estos tienen en sus mismos lugares. Y eso nosotros creemos que es un error y lo vamos a decir en la cumbre. Sin por un momento dejar de levantar nuestra voz para defender los derechos humanos, para condenar la prisión política, para manifestar nuestra preocupación respecto a la crisis migratoria, que además ustedes saben, Chile ha sido uno de los países que más venezolanos ha recibido producto de esta crisis. Y lo que queremos decirle no solamente a Estados Unidos, esto va más allá de Estados Unidos porque es la cumbre de todos los estados de América, es que necesitamos trabajar con mayor solidaridad, necesitamos trabajar juntos. Y que no puede ser que en nuestro continente americano de lo único que se hable afuera es solamente de nuestras desavenencias respecto a 2 o 3 países, que tenemos muchos más temas en común, como lo que hemos presentado hoy día con el primer ministro de Canadá, Justin Trudeau, y que cuando hablemos de derechos humanos lo vamos a hacer en serio, sin miramientos, sin ver quién es el presidente que los vulnera, y que vamos a hablar sobre energía renovable, que vamos a hablar sobre derechos de los pueblos originarios, que vamos a hablar sobre igualdad de género y crecimiento inclusivo. Y eso esperamos sea lo principal de esta cumbre, a la que, por cierto, vamos a invitar a sumarse en este espíritu al resto de los países de nuestro continente americano.
Next question.
Presidente Boric, buenas tardes.
Muy buenas tardes.
¿El gobierno de Chile está dispuesto o tiene entre sus planes realizar transferencias directas a comunidades indígenas? ¿Ve viable que en su periodo se pueda realizar un aporte significativo? Y lo segundo, presidente, el ministro Trudeau anunció un proyecto que congela la tenencia de armas de fuego en Canadá. ¿Va en esa línea la propuesta que usted tiene para nuestro país? Gracias.
Muchas gracias. Respecto a lo primero, Chile ha venido haciendo traspasos de tierras directos desde la CONADI a comunidades desde hace muchos años ya. Y la verdad es que el mecanismo que se ha utilizado ha llegado a un límite, pues es bastante claro, que no ha solucionado el conflicto porque es un problema de tierras, pero no es solo un problema de tierras el que tenemos en Chile. Es también de multiculturalidad, es también de diversidad lingüística, es también de acceso a servicios básicos como agua, luz, caminos. Entonces el plan que le hemos presentado a nuestro país para abordar el conflicto que hoy día existe entre el Estado chileno y el pueblo nación mapuche es mucho más integral que solo tierras, partiendo de la base de que la tierra está en la esencia del conflicto y que por lo tanto tenemos la voluntad de solucionarlo. Y ahí todas las actorías tienen que jugar un rol, Estado, privados, las forestales, que son parte del problema, y por cierto las comunidades que creen en la vía pacífica, porque es la vía pacífica la manera de resolver estos conflictos. Segundo, lo que me preguntaba respecto del tema de armas, efectivamente el congelamiento de armas es una de las medidas que estamos evaluando para Chile. Nosotros queremos de que en Chile no proliferen las armas. Para que no hayan dudas, las vamos a perseguir y eliminar de los delincuentes, de los narcotraficantes, de los grupos que creen que mediante la violencia se puede avanzar, pero tampoco queremos que estén en la sociedad civil. Por eso vamos a presentar un proyecto prontamente para la prohibición de tenencia de armas y que acá no se asuste nadie, que esto es por el bien de todos, porque sabemos, acá en la frontera cerquita, cómo terminan las sociedades que terminan armándose hasta los dientes para terminar ejerciendo la justicia por mano propia. Eso no funciona.
Prochaine question, Valérie.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur le Premier ministre, bonjour, Monsieur le Président. D'abord, le président chilien vient justement de parler du gel des armes puis de ce projet qu'il trouve inspirant. Cependant, en fin de semaine, on a vu un peu partout au pays, justement des vendeurs des armes de poing, carrément dévalisées par des gens qui veulent se procurer des armes avant que ce gel-là ne survienne. Est-ce que vous n'avez pas l'impression que cette politique-là, cette mesure-là a un effet pervers? C'est-à-dire qu'il y a des gens qui se procurent rapidement ces armes-là, puis en même temps, ça n'agit pas sur les frontières.
Ben, tout d'abord, nous avons été là pour investir pour plus de protection de nos frontières. Au cours des dernières années, les investissements qu'on a faits a presque doublé le nombre d'armes trafiquées, saisies à nos frontières. Donc, ça fait partie de la solution. Mais nous savons aussi que d'empêcher les gens de pouvoir acheter, vendre, transférer ou importer des armes de poing au pays est une mesure importante pour maintenant et pour les années à venir. Je comprends que d'ici le passage de ce projet de loi, il y a des gens qui vont choisir de s'acheter un arme de poing, mais en même temps, on essaye d'accélérer le passage de ce projet de loi. On a mis en place des régulations pour que si le passage de cette loi tarde longtemps, les régulations vont venir en effet avant cela. Et nous allons continuer à dire que les armes de poing, les armes d'assaut ont besoin d'être plus restreints. On en a besoin d'avoir moins dans nos communautés pour pouvoir garder les gens en sécurité.
¿Me permite agregar una cosita sobre eso? Muy breve. Que la pregunta que usted hace dice relación también con un objetivo que tenemos al discutir conjuntamente estos temas, que es que no bastan con las regulaciones al interior de un solo país. Para poder mejorar justamente, por ejemplo, en control de armas, tenemos que promover también legislación internacional. Y tenemos que, ojalá, generar una conciencia más allá de nuestras fronteras que la tenencia de armas le hace mal a las sociedades. Y por eso que lo hagamos desde Chile hasta Canadá, ojalá con todos los países que estén entre medio, en particular los que están cerca, ojalá sirva de algo.
Monsieur le Premier ministre, toujours sur les fronts. Oui?
Je vais juste répondre en anglais d'abord à votre question. There are three main ways for criminals in this country to get and use illegal guns. One is for them to steal those guns from legitimate gun owners. One is for them to purchase them illegally from someone who's purchased them legally. And the third is on illegal importation or smuggling across our border with the United States. Our approach now and over the past years has been focused on all three of those paths. First of all, when it comes to assault-style weapons, they're banned in Canada, have been for the past 2 years. It's now illegal to buy, sell, or use military-style assault weapons in Canada, and will remain so even as we move forward with a mandatory buyback beginning later this year. In regards to handguns, we've put forward legislation that means that as soon as the legislation passes, it will be illegal to buy, sell, import, or transfer handguns in Canada. We're capping the number of handguns in this country right now. And third, we are moving forward and have moved forward on greater investments at the border to crack down on smuggling. Indeed, just the measures we've done over the past years meant that last year we interdicted and seized more than twice as many handguns at the border as we had in previous years. So we're on the right track, and we will continue to step up in ways that follows the simple math. Reduce the number of guns in our country, reduce the level of gun violence in our country.
Et puis toujours concernant les frontières, il y a bien des Canadiens qui annulent leurs voyages, leurs vacances cet été parce qu'il y a des délais énormes pour obtenir un passeport. Certains diront que vous auriez pu agir autrement. D'abord, c'est quoi votre message pour les Canadiens qui se retrouvent dans cette situation-là? Qu'est-ce qui aurait pu être fait et qu'est-ce que vous allez faire?
Tout d'abord, quand on voyait qu'il y a des possibilités que le gouvernement et que le Canada pourraient rouvrir autour de Noël, on a pu investir pour embaucher presque 500 nouvelles personnes pour travailler dans nos bureaux de passeport. Donc, une bonne chose qu'on a fait ça parce que ça permet maintenant de faire des processus de 40 000 passeports par jour. Je comprends qu'il y a des gens qui font face à des délais et on est en train de faire tout ce qu'on peut pour essayer d'accélérer les processus parce que oui, les Canadiens veulent voyager, on veut accueillir des gens ici. Il faut quand même faire attention avec la COVID, mais on est en train de mettre en place les mesures nécessaires pour accélérer les processus pour les passeports.
Last question, Mercedes.
Hi, Prime Minister, President. Mercedes Stevenson, Global News. I'd like to ask you about China's reaction to their buzzing of Five Eyes intelligence aircraft, including Canada and Australia's. Over the weekend, we learned that they'd released chaff into an Australian jet's engine that actually caused damage. Today, the Chinese Foreign Ministry responded to both, defending their actions, saying that they were reasonable, forceful, and professional, and also said this: we urge Canada to face up to the seriousness of the situation, strictly restrain its frontline forces, and refrain from committing any risky and provocative acts. Otherwise, all serious consequences arising therefrom shall be borne by the Canadian side. That sounds like a threat, Prime Minister.
Canada is participating in a UN mission designed to interdict and intercept and ensure the respect of sanctions on North Korea's murderous regime. We are part, as we so often are, of a group of like-minded nations under the aegis of the United Nations to ensure that United Nations sanctions are properly enforced. Canada continues to stand up for the rule of law. We continue to stand up for multilateralism. We continue to stand up for the principles of the UN Charter, and we will continue to. China's actions are irresponsible and provocative in this case, and we will continue to register strongly that they are putting people at risk while at the same time not respecting decisions by the UN to enforce UN sanctions on North Korea.
Thank you. That concludes today's press conference. Merci. Ceci met fin à la conférence de presse.
Merci tout le monde. Gracias.
Muchas gracias.
Hello everyone. Mon nom est Stephen Guilbeault et je suis ministre de l'Environnement et de la lutte au changement climatique. My name is Stephen and I'm the Minister of Environment and Climate Change. C'est un grand honneur pour moi d'être ici aujourd'hui avec vous sur le territoire traditionnel de la nation algonquine Anishinaabe. Nous avons quelques invités très spéciaux aujourd'hui qui se joindront à nous dans quelques minutes. But first, I want to thank each and every one of you for being here with us today. We're in Ottawa's Museum of Nature. So a quick history lesson. Back in 1916, Canadian welcome to the Honourable Chilean Gabriel Boric and the Prime Minister of Canada, Mr. Justin Trudeau.
Merci, Stephen. Good to see you all. What a pleasure to be here today for, honestly, what is my favorite thing. Conversations with young people about where our country's going, conversations about the environment, about our democracy, about the challenges we're facing, about the world that you see unfolding. Quite frankly, you know, your teachers will have told you this is an opportunity for you to hear from the people who are, you know, making decisions that will affect you for years to come. Well, for me, this is an opportunity for me to hear from the people who will be impacted by the decisions I'll be making for years to come. And so much of politics is short term, right? I mean, you think about what you need to do in terms of the next news cycle or what you need to do in terms of the next election date and how can you prove that you've made things forward. But so many of the challenges we're facing are long term, go beyond one mandate or two mandates or three mandates. Think of fighting climate change or reconciliation with Indigenous people. Or eradicating poverty, or creating a properly gender-balanced country, and removing sort of gender inequities, or fighting racism, including systemic racism inside all our institutions. Those are things that take a long while to do. But in order to do the things that are hard and take a long while to do, we need to make sure that all of you are thinking about what that's going to look like and challenging us to do that. And that's why young people getting involved in politics is so much more than just a few extra voices around the table. It actually brings that dynamism and those reflections about how to shape the future in really, really meaningful ways. And the challenges we're facing here in Canada that I listed are not unique to Canada, obviously. Challenges around fighting climate change and protecting our oceans. Challenges around growing the economy in a way that lifts everyone up. Challenges around reconciliation with Indigenous peoples is something that people around the world are struggling with. And of all the different countries that struggle with it, we have here a new friend in Gabriel Boric, newly elected president of Chile, who came out first as a student activist, as his involvements in politics. As of about 12 years old, you got involved in politics, and was focused on making a change in his country by mobilizing a new generation of political leaders, and has gotten elected in Chile with a mandate that all of you would recognize. Indigenous reconciliation, fighting climate change, making sure you're building an economy that leaves room for everyone to succeed. And that matters not just in Chile, of course it really matters in Chile, and it really matters in Canada that we have leaders like this, but it matters for the world. At a time where we're seeing democracies backslide everywhere around the world, a rise of populism and nationalism, a rise of authoritarianism and strongman politics, it really matters that we have strong young leaders like Gabriel stepping forward to say, no, this is the direction that we need to go in, not just as a country, not just as a continent, but as a world. And that's why it's an incredible pleasure for me to be able to introduce you and, through our friends in the media, so many Canadians to this extraordinary young leader that I'm very excited about working with in the coming years, Gabriel Boric. Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Justin. I'll do my best in my English. As you know, it's not my mother tongue, but I'll try to explain myself or make myself clear. If there's any doubt about what I'm saying, of my pronunciation, it's not that good. Please feel free to interrupt me and ask. So, in this room, it's happening something that we're not used to in politics, not only in Chile, but in my opinion, in the world. There is much more young people than old people. And it's not that the young people are better than the older, but we are the ones, I don't know if you know the band Silverchair, from the 2000s, they said, because we young people are nowadays feeling and experiencing what the future is going to be like. And there are a lot of times when people in our countries are against any kind of change. And they say they don't want to contribute to climate change because they don't believe in it, or they don't think that gender equality is important because things have always worked like that, with men over women. And indigenous people don't really matter because they were so long ago important, not anymore. But we are here to say that those things are important. And even more, we are here to say that it is possible to build a future, a more equal future, where nobody steps behind. And in my country, in Chile, do you know where my country is? Chile, have you heard about Chile? what have you heard about Chile? Because we don't really know what you know about us. Can you tell me some things you know about Chile? Yeah. So we're partners in that. Yeah, well, that's true. The CIA didn't help a lot. Our history is a history of a country, a young country, 200 years, but a country that has fought for independence and to build its own future, and it has been really difficult for us and to most of South American countries because of the U.S. Not only because of the U.S., but one of the main reasons. And but I don't want to look into the past because we have a lot of opportunities now in the future. You know, the world is changing so fast, and we have a lot of opportunities in order to fight climate change, to improve on gender equality, to respect human rights. And the message I want to transmit to you, to tell you, it's that you have to value your democracy. You know why? You might think democracy, it's boring some days, that nothing really happens, that we have no big fights as in other countries, but as your friend said here, you don't know when you can lose it. And we lost it in Chile 50 years ago. It's a lot, but we still remember that. And now we are in a process of changes, in a constitutional process, to change our constitution and to change the way we treat each other in order to build a better future and to save our democracy. So what I want to tell you is that you guys are important to building a better society. And I was in high school not so long ago. I'm 36 now. I'm the youngest president in the history of my country, and I'm aware that we can make a difference. And the organization of young people and learning from the guys that came before, it's really, really important. And your voice makes a difference. It did in Chile. It did also in Canada when Justin was first time elected Prime Minister. So please don't forget your importance in building the society that we want. Because when you don't speak up, when you don't bring your interests or your preoccupations to the debates, others will. And most of the time, people that, no harm intended, but people, the older people, are more afraid of change. And we need to change to stay alive in the world, especially in the climate crisis that we are facing nowadays, and in the risks that democracies have now with the authoritarian leaderships, as we are seeing, for example, in Russia. So I'm really glad to be here. I'm really glad to have the opportunity to have a conversation here with you. Please excuse me if I cannot express in the best mood my ideas in English, but if I insist, if there's any question, please let me know so I can explain best. I'm with some of my people, my ministers that are also young people here. They can also participate in this really interesting conversation with you guys. Thank you very much.
We are now ready for the Q&A session. So if you have a question, you can raise your hand and we will come around with a mic. You can also stand up and ask your question. Tell us your name and the school you're from. We will start on the right. To the right.
Hi, my name is Frankie. I'm a 12th grade student at Corinne Wilson Secondary School. So Chile and Canada have both agreed to a target of net zero emissions by 2050. So we were just wondering, what have you done so far most significantly to reach this goal?
Minister?
Yeah. Actually, yesterday it was Sunday. Yesterday we passed a law in Chile that forced the government to. We have 24 ministers in Chile. So 17 of them are now working on the goal of being carbon neutrals in 2050. And we are going to check on that goal every 5 years in order to arrive there earlier. Because in my opinion, 2050 is kind of far away for what we need, what we really need. And also we are changing, or we are attempting to change the way we are developing. For example, we closed our coal mines, a lot of coal mines in Chile, and we are investing a lot in renewable energies, wind energy, solar energy, and green hydrogen. Also, that it will be really important not only for Chile but for the world. Chile has big opportunities because we have critical minerals, we have wind, we have sun, we have the sky, and we can help other countries in the world to advance into carbon. We have copper, also and lithium, to advance into carbon neutrality. So we're working really hard on that. We are taking it seriously. Let me add just one more thing. There are some countries, like we are countries in the way to development. We're not as Canada, that it's already developed. We have a lot of poverty yet. We have a lot of inequality. And there are some countries like us, undeveloped countries, that argue that we should demand the developed countries to become carbon neutral before us. I say no. We have to be first on the line because this will affect us, and we can make an example. One last thing, sorry, to extend. We are actually with your minister, with your PM, we are signing an agreement with the intention to protect oceans, because you know the way to fight climate change, it's not only reducing carbon neutrality but also taking care of the environment. And we think that from Chile and Canada we can help a lot protecting our Pacific Ocean.
Excellent. How about a round of applause for everything they're doing in Chile? In Canada, over the past 7 years, we actually did one thing right off the bat, which is, Canada had always had targets on emissions reduction, whether it was the Kyoto targets or the 2030 targets put forward by the last government. We just never had a plan to actually reach those targets in any real concrete way. So one of the first things we had to do in 2015 when we got elected was create a plan that was going to reach the reduction targets we had, which we did, create that plan for 2030. But then we have to keep, as you all know, step up our ambition on being more and more ambitious. So when we got in 2015, we kept the regular targets that were there of 30% reduction by 2030, but we actually created a plan that was going to get us there. That was the first step, because we hadn't had that. Now, we've moved up to 32, then 36%, and now finally 42 to 45% target of reductions from 2030 levels. And that's not an easy thing, because first of all, Canada already has phased out its coal plants, or in the process of phasing out its coal plants, so those are going to be gone by 2030. We continue to produce oil and gas that Canadians and people around the world, particularly with Russia's invasion, still needs, at least for a number more years. And at the same time, we have to reduce the carbon emissions of that oil and gas and invest in those renewables so that we're no longer reliant on oil and gas by 2050. And that's a big pivot for Canada because we are one of the top energy producing countries in the world. So it's harder for us to do, but just as Gabrielle pointed out that, developing nations, that are bold are stepping up to say, yes, it's hard for us to do, but we're going to do it. That's exactly what Canada said as well. And you will know there are huge debates over whether we're going far enough on fighting climate change in Canada or whether we're doing way too much on fighting climate change. It depends what part of the country you're in. But what we've done, like Gabrielle pointed out, we have a new law that says every 5 years we've got to show where we are on the track to 2050, net zero. We also did something that not enough countries around the world has done, which is bring in a price on pollution. Meaning it is not free to pollute anymore anywhere in Canada. And we got a lot of opposition from that. Conservative politicians, including in a number of provinces, took us all the way to the Supreme Court to say we couldn't put a price on pollution in their provinces. And we ended up winning at the Supreme Court because it recognized that no, it matters too much to everyone, and pollution doesn't know provincial borders, it just crosses the country. So we actually won that, and we've moved forward with a price on pollution that is making sure that industry and businesses actually find it worthwhile to invest in technologies that are going to reduce their carbon emissions, because that's the way we need to go. The price signal isn't about punishment, it's about saying if you just keep behaving the same way you are, it's going to get more and more expensive. But if you innovate and you invest in new technology that might be a little more expensive, but that will save you money in the long run as price goes up, then you're better off. And the other thing we do is we actually, because we're putting that price on industry, we're returning more money every year with that price on pollution to the average families than we take from them. There's lots of other things like investing massively in renewables and in science and technology and ways to reduce emissions, massive investments in innovation. We've hit some of the most ambitious targets on reducing methane emissions in a way that is leading the world that we announced at Glasgow at COP26. But there's lots more to do, and that's why we need all of you to continue not just to push me and push this government to do more quicker, but to push every single politician at every single order of government that they have to do more. Not just because it's the well-being of the planet and your future at stake, but also because that's how we're going to create the jobs and the economic growth and the opportunity of the future with these technologies, with these solutions that the world needs. So that's what we're focused on. Thank you for your question. And I think both Gabrielle and I are going to have to shorten our answers if we're going to get to enough questions.
Hello, this is a question for Mr. Prime Minister. So my question is, will you fulfill the promise you made in your 2015 and 2021 campaigns by replacing the first past the post electoral system with a new kind of proportional representation electoral system? Thank you.
No. I don't believe in proportional representation. I don't think it's a good idea. I did commit to replacing the first past the post system. I love the idea of a ranked ballot where you get to pick your first choice, pick the red guy first and then the orange girl second and the green person third, and then you never get the blue person if that's the way you choose to vote. So you don't have to worry about who might get elected if you vote for your preferred choice. I think having people challenge themselves as a political party to be people's second or third choices actually brings people together. But I think anywhere we see it, proportional representation is a recipe for divisive and regional outcomes that don't make for stable approaches, like, quite frankly, we've been able to show in this Parliament, working hand in hand with the NDP to have stability. So I would still love to replace first past the post with a ranked ballot. I think it would be good for Canada. But it's not something a prime minister, even a prime minister with a majority, like I was in that first term, should be able to do alone. Because that's an irreversible change, right? If you elect a bad government, well, you have to suffer through it for 4 years, and then you get another chance to elect a different government. If you change the way voting happens, well, then maybe you don't get to reverse the changes that you bring in. So an irreversible change needs a level of consensus. And no matter how much I've tried, and I have tried, to bring people to the idea that maybe getting a ranked ballot would be a significant improvement over the existing first past the post, no other party has been willing to accept to make that change, and therefore I happily, well, not happily, grumpily accept that I'm not going to be able to achieve that commitment I made because it would be worse for the country to do something without consensus, and it would be worse for the country to do something that I deeply believe would be bad for the country to move towards proportional representation. And I've always been clear on that for the past 10, 15 years of political activism, that I think proportional representation would be a mistake for Canada. But ranked ballot, I would do tomorrow. If the NDP asked me to do that, it would be there. But they don't want to do that, so not doing it. Thank you.
Hi, I am Sunita de Souza from the La Salle High School. En febrero de 2022, había 40 compañías mineras canadienses en operación en Chile. Estas compañías son responsables por la contaminación del agua, la destrucción de los territorios ancestrales y la explotación de los obreros. En el tiempo del presidente Allende, estas compañías no tenían tanto derecho de explotación, pero durante la dictadura de Pinochet, ellas se hicieron conceder más libertad. Señores, ¿cómo ven el futuro minero canadiense en Chile a causa de su pasado tumultuoso?
I can say we talked about that significantly during our bilats, and I'll let you answer first, but then I'll have a few things to say about critical minerals and mining as well.
Yeah, well, she asked me about what are we going to do with mining companies that were used to destroy our territory and were used to got a lot of revenues and they didn't give enough to the country where they worked. And some of those companies were Canadian. But what I want to say is that we believe the way that we can change our development goals is convincing and forcing the private sector to work better. We have to higher our standards, our environmental standards, and we are, I told actually Mr. Trudeau that we want to demand Canadian companies to behave as is in Chile as if they were in Canada. Because there's no reason that can justify that in some countries you behave in some way you wouldn't do in your own country. Another thing important that you brought up is the revenues. We will try to pass a tax reform, an important tax reform, because Chile, one of the biggest problems in Chile is inequality. In Chile, the 1% of the population, the richest 1%, owns the 27% of the GDP, of the wealthiness of the nation in economic terms. And so richness is really concentrated. And one of the ways that we can redistribute it better is with taxes on mining, especially mining, because Chile is a mining country. We actually have the 30% of the copper of the world. And the world needs copper in order to advance to electromobility, for example. So we are planning to pass a tax reform in order to get more revenues and to hide the standards, not only environmental standards, but also the relationships that companies have to have with communities, indigenous communities and local communities. And also, I think that it's really, really important for us in Chile, water. We lack of water. We need more water. We have a big dry out, that's how you say it, a big dry? Drought. Sequía. And we need companies that use a lot of water, like mining companies or the agricultural companies, to use in a better way water. So we are working on, for example, desalinization process in order to get a more environmental standard.
Excellent. No, we talked about this, and it is extremely important that like-minded countries work together. And it has been a long challenge and a long-standing objective of Canadian governments and Canadian mining industry to make sure that they follow the same kinds of values and principles that they do as Canadians in Canada overseas as well. And the vast majority of Canadian mining companies are responsible. There are some that are not, and we have to be tougher against them. But when we talk about mining, it's easy for a room filled with young people and thinking about the knowledge economy and the ways of the future to say, oh, mining, that was part of the past. You know, we need to talk about technologies of the future like AI and you know, the knowledge economy and innovations and technology. Well, that all relies on a handful of critical minerals and rare earth elements to make our phones, our electric cars, our wind turbines, our environmentally responsible future happens. We need critical minerals. And Canada is, like Chile, a tremendous source for critical minerals. But we cannot simply go at mining the way we have in the past or the way some other countries are. Right now, we get most of our lithium, the world supply of lithium, the world supply of a lot of critical minerals from countries that don't necessarily share our values. Think about China, think about Russia. And yes, it will be a little more expensive to mine and process lithium in Canada than it would be, or than it is, to mine and process it in China, for example, because we have environmental standards and labor standards and needing to work with indigenous peoples. But the world, particularly now that people are looking at our reliance on certain countries that are less reliable in terms of partners for these minerals, the world will be willing to support and invest in countries like Chile and Canada that say, no, we're going to do things properly and support local peoples and protect the environment and deliver you your shiny new technological gadgets. Because that's the way the world is moving. And one of the things that we're doing, one of the things that Gabrielle and I have talked a lot about, is the need to include indigenous peoples as full partners. And that's one of the changes we've made in Canada over the past 7 years that we've been working on reconciliation. You will have noticed that the previous government was able to approve all sorts of things quickly by not consulting or building partnerships with indigenous peoples. So all these companies were, great, I got an approval, I can go do it. And then what would happen? They get bogged down in the courts because indigenous people would rightly put up their hands and say, you didn't consult us, you didn't partner with us, you didn't do the right kinds of things to make this happen properly, and the courts would stop those projects. So what we've done as a government is instead bring in the indigenous people at the beginning and build trust and say, okay, if we were to put a mine here in your territory or in your traditional lands, how is it that you want to be part of it, part owners? How is it you want to create good jobs through it? How is it that you want to benefit the community? How do you want to protect your land from the mining that goes on as well in terms of environmental? And by building those partnerships up front, we can actually rebuild the trust and stand squarely and cleanly in saying that this is the kind of solutions we need as a responsible world. And that's exactly the kinds of partnerships that we're going to work on with Chile as we move forward, because the reality is countries like Canada, Chile, and even Canada we don't have the ability to invest alone in some of these big projects. We need global investors to come in, but we need to draw them in with the right framework and the right opportunities. And that's the pitch we make, and that's how we grow our economies in responsible ways. And that's something that we've evolved a lot in over the past decades. But I thank you very much for that beautiful question and your excellent Spanish, which I was actually able to follow, which I'm always pleased with myself when I can. But thank you.
Hi, my name's Anne Flockton. I am a representative for Scouts Canada. This is a question for President Boric. Given the success of aquaculture in Chile, is there anything that could be adapted to the Canadian fisheries?
That's a really hard question because I don't know the details of the agricultural industry in Canada. What can I say about it? We are having big trouble in not only in Chile. I think it's all over the world. In I don't know how you say it in fertilizer.
Open net?
No, fertilizer.
Fertilizers.
You asked me about agriculture.
No,
right?
aquaculture, fish farming.
Ah, fish farming. Sorry, I heard aqua. Okay, yeah, there's a lot to learn. Don't do it. No, don't want to go that way. But agriculture, we have had a lot of trouble with agriculture. You mean salmon, right?
Yes.
Fish, yeah.
Open net versus
open net in sea.
In seawater.
Well, we are working now to regulate and to higher standards for agriculture because we have had some disasters, some environmental disasters in Chile. First of all, what we can recommend is to regulate, to have a good regulation with communities in order to give a lot of space in between the concessions. Because if there's a problem in one concession, they can spread. It can be spread in the rest of them. And we are working to protect more marine areas, and we are trying to convince or first convince the industry not to establish in protected areas like natural parks and stuff like that. It has been difficult. And another important thing is that the state, the government, has to have independent way of fiscalization. Fiscalization, is that okay? Because you cannot depend on the industry to see what's going on the process. You cannot depend on the industry to tell you if they are like fulfilling all the goals that the law impose. So have a good fiscalization system. Oversight system, a good oversight system, and it's an industry that you don't want to let it expand it a lot. You have to be really take a look at it.
We do have some open net fish farms in Canada. One of the challenges we face is a lot of them are run by Indigenous communities. So we get an intersection between environmental concerns and respect for Indigenous livelihood and Indigenous economic success. So it's not an easy question that my friend Premier John Horgan in BC and I have been struggling with on a way to actually move forward that is going to support communities but also protect the environment while providing the protein that so many of us need. But yeah.
Hello, I am Zan Frederick from Nepean High School. Mr. Trudeau, as you mentioned, I think in the first question, Canada's current climate target is to cut greenhouse gas emissions by 40 to 45% by 2030 from the 2005 levels, and to reach net zero emissions by 2050. However, according to Climate Action Tracker, a 40 to 45% cut isn't enough, And not only this, but we're not even on track to reach our targets. Climate Action Tracker says our climate finance and policies, as well as action, are, quote, highly insufficient. In fact, projections state that our CO2 emissions will actually slightly increase from what they currently are by 2030. When will this thin veneer of climate action give way to tangible positive change?
You know, one of the great things about being Prime Minister is I get to surround myself with brilliant, amazing people who step up to do the big things. Now, I gave an answer on climate earlier, but I'm going to call on my friend Stephen Guilbeault, who's answered this question. So come on up, Stephen. And he started as a climate activist, and getting him convinced to step into government was not an easy thing. But he only did it because he felt like we were actually the best shot Canada had of actually leading on climate change and making it happen. And now he's the one in charge of making it happen, and we are making it happen. Go ahead, Stephen.
Thank you, and thank you for your question. In fact, I was meeting with someone from Climate Action Tracker 2 weeks ago in Berlin at the G7 Environment and Climate Change Minister. And you know, as the Prime Minister said earlier, it is tough in a country. It is tough everywhere to reduce emissions, and if you look around the world, there are some countries that are on the right path, but only a handful of them. And fortunately for them, unfortunately for us, what we're seeing in these countries is that there's been consistent action to fight climate change over the years. That wasn't the case here. When the Prime Minister and his team came in 2015, for 10 years, nothing happened on climate change. We started changing that with price on pollution, methane emission reduction. We're on track to reducing methane emissions in Canada in the oil and gas sector by 50% by 2025, and we're heading to 75% reduction by 2030. No other countries in the world have had such an ambitious target. No one, and especially not a large oil and gas producer. I respectfully disagree with the conclusion of Climate Action Tracker by saying that our emissions will increase. In 2019, our emissions decreased in Canada, and they decreased in 2020. Now, obviously in 2020, we know that there was a big pandemic, so part of it has to do with the pandemic. And the emission reduction plan that the Prime Minister and I presented at the end of March, for the first time in Canada's histories, maps out how we get in each and every sector of our economy to our 2030 targets. And environmental groups, I mean, as an environment minister, you rarely get to please everyone from Greenpeace to oil and gas companies in the same day. But that's exactly what we did that day. Everyone said, some like environmentalists said, we want more, but everyone recognized how detailed, how strong, and how clear our plan was. And some of them said, for the first time, we have a real plan to get there. So we're on track, but there's lots more work that we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Bonjour, je me nomme Nora Dewolf de l'école secondaire publique de La Salle et je vous demande comment travaillez-vous avec vos peuples aborigènes respectifs pour combattre le changement climatique? Merci.
Great question on how we work with Indigenous peoples to fight climate change. You got pretty good French. It's impressive. He was practicing it on me earlier. I think understanding, one of the tragedies of the past century in Canada is we spent a lot of time not just discounting, but actively trying to eradicate Indigenous knowledge, culture, teachings, language, because we thought we had all the answers as settlers. And it was horribly wrong-headed and has led to trauma and intergenerational trauma and socioeconomic outcomes and challenges faced by Indigenous peoples to this day. Our past has very much articulated a very difficult future. But the irony in there, amongst all the tragedy, is that the kind of thinking around stewardship of the earth, around respect over future generations, around the idea that you don't inherit the earth from your parents, you borrow it from your children, is the kind of thinking that we need now in everything we do, in the way we work, not just as a government, but as a society. And Indigenous people have always seen that and always understood that. So we find ourselves in a position now of trying to draw on indigenous knowledge and understanding and respect for this land that sustains us all in a way that informs our path forward. And that's where those partnerships and that understanding and that side-by-side renewed relationship with Indigenous peoples is such an important part of our path forward, not just to make right on the terrible wrongs of the past that Canada perpetrated and perpetuated, but to actually move forward into the kind of world that you deserve for yourselves, your kids, and your grandkids.
Can I ask you a question? I don't know if I got it right, but you asked also by gender, right? Which was the gender view of fighting climate change? Right?
Not specifically, but you can elaborate on that if you like.
Sorry. Bring in that angle. That's a good
one. You know, indeed, I don't want to bring it up. I thought you asked because there is a lot of discussion about that in Chile, about intersectionality, about people that have been left behind. And one of the people that have been left behind, at least in Chile, are indigenous women. And they are facing poverty and the consequences of climate change a lot more harder than men. And that's because in Chile, at least, I don't know how it's in Canada, but we were used to leave the women all the care of children, of people with illness, of older people, and they had to stay at home. So when there's no way to provide at home, women suffer more. And we are trying to achieve changes on that way of thinking by including more women and indigenous women into the discussion. But also, I want to say that nothing it's going to change if we don't understand in our country, in Chile, that there are other ways of approaching reality than just the European way of thinking. And so I don't know how to say it in English, but cosmovision, the vision of the world that indigenous people have, it's valuable. And we have to learn from that. And it's not a prehistoric vision, because some people think that indigenous people should be left as like tourism. Like you gotta go and see how people lived hundreds of years ago. But they are also building their societies. They have a language, they have a way of thinking, they have a way of works, they have medicine. And if we as a society are able to include that in our reflections and in the way we face challenges as climate change, I think we can do better. We have a lot to learn from them.
My name is Faye McBride. I'm from Nepean High School. My question is a bit similar to one that was asked earlier, but I'd love to hear about some more specific action that's going to be taken, even though some great general ideas were discussed. So in an effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, there's been a rise in the popularity of electric vehicles and renewable energy in Canada. However, behind this green growth imagery, there has been Canadian mining companies viewing this increased demand for copper, lithium, and other metals solely as an opportunity for profit. These companies are placing mines all around the world, including in Chile. In doing so, they're taking advantage of lenient regulations surrounding the environment, workers, Indigenous peoples, and human rights. How do you, Mr. Justin Trudeau, plan to hold Canadian companies accountable while working with Indigenous communities globally to ensure they are in control of their own lands and are not harmed by the negative impacts of mining?
Well, I can tell you it makes it a lot easier for us to have that impact when we have a partner like Gabriel Boric. When the Chilean government says, no, yes, we want to see Chile grow and contribute to the global economy and the need for minerals of the future to drive our cars and to drive our economies, but it has to be done the right way. It makes it a lot easier for me and for Canada to ensure that those standards are being met. The challenge is that there are countries around the world that don't take that view, that don't care about Indigenous rights, that don't care about labor standards, or don't care about environmental concerns, or are so overwhelmed with pressing survival problems that they don't have the space to care for that. And no matter how much Canada would want to tell them that they have to, we don't get to dictate what happens in other countries. And that's where working with progressive leaders and countries that are focused on creating a new paradigm, understanding that we can't, as a civilization, as a society, turn our backs on what's happening on the other side of the world just because we don't see it. Because now we do see it, and we do have responsibilities for it. And as we begin to understand the supply chains that involve child labor, or supply chains that involve unacceptable human rights abuses, or supply chains that involve impossible environmental degradation, are no longer acceptable, not just to Canadian consumers, but to more and more markets around the world, there becomes an impetus to make that change. And that's exactly what we're focused on.
I would like to add that it could be a contradiction, or we can have a contradiction in between, like, advancing into electromobility. But in order to advance to electromobility, you need copper or lithium. And the copper and lithium, in order to get it, you need mining companies. So the easiest answer would be, no, we will no longer permit mining companies in, for example, our country. But so which is the cost, the alternative cost of that decision? That oil and gas will keep on, will still be the main resources. So I think the answer, it's more difficult, but we have to work on that, and we have to say, yes, we need copper, we need lithium, but we need copper and lithium with no carbon impact, and we have to force companies to work on that, and we have to make the necessary reforms in order to have a higher standard. And it's not only a moral issue, it's also an economic issue. Because if we do it good, if we do it better, well, I think it's a survival thing. If we keep on destroying our environment, if we keep on destroying the communities that live along or beside mines, they will not last. So we can do it better. I think in Canada you have some good examples of that. In Chile we are advancing in that way. That's not only the private sector, also the state companies have to do better. And we are working hard on that with Codelco. But I think there's no contradiction in between needing or advancing into electromobility and having higher standards in mining companies, for example.
The next question will be our last question.
Hi, my name is Jacinta. I go to Colonel By Secondary School. My question is for President Boric. Usted partió su vida política como líder estudiantil ¿Qué podría compartirnos desde su experiencia sobre cómo los jóvenes podemos tener liderazgos públicos en temas como el medio ambiente y el cambio climático?
Yeah, I didn't catch any of that. So,
she was asking how, what advice can give all of you guys, as I was a former student leader, to change things in politics. What I would say is, as you've been doing it today, feel always not free but compelled to question authority. Question authority. Listen to punk music, please. We need rebel people. Don't respect that much as authority. Put in doubt what we are saying. As, for example, you said, I don't remember your name, but you questioned the goals that Canada had in front of the Prime Minister. That's the way. And if someone agrees with him, please go and talk to him afterwards and form a group, like a political group or an activist group, and keep on questioning. And don't only think that, but don't stay there. It's not only to question, but also to propose changes. Because it's easier to say nothing works, you're bullshit, you are a liar, you don't fulfill your promises or whatever. But, well, if he's not doing it, then you have to fight for it, as he did 15 years ago, or as I did a couple of years ago. The energy of young people, and please listen to the song I told you, what's the name, of Silverchair, it's called like the year 2000, it's in Neon Ballroom album, Silverchair, remember. The important thing is that youth can renew the way we think. And so please never stop questioning, so never stop asking, never stop proposing. Even that it doesn't matter if you make mistakes. We've made a lot of mistakes. And the older people had made a lot of big, huge mistakes. So we need you in public spaces. Don't embarrass. Don't embarrass to talk. We guys really need you, and we need you not alone. We need you organized. We need you advocating for rights. We need you protesting. We need you helping other people. So that's it. That's my best advice. And one last thing, in politics, it's never easy. You will, if you decide to come along this path, you will have a lot of headaches, and there's a lot of sacrifice, but it's worth it, because you're not working just for yourself, but the society, and that's really meaningful.
I think that's a wonderful way to end this, and I'll just add a couple of thoughts on that, because I get that question a lot from young people on how to become more active, how to change the world, how to shape the world around you, because that's what young people are all that's what you're all focused on. That's what you're here for. And the thing is that young people often get a bad rap for being apathetic or cynical, but it's never because you don't care about the world. It's because you care so much you're deeply frustrated that you're not being listened to, that you're not being empowered. And that's really important, that not just occasions like this, but that you do mobilize and make yourselves heard and get out and vote. In 2015, when I got elected, young people came out massively to remove Stephen Harper from office and bring in a progressive alternative. And I made promises. I got elected on a promise to do more on reconciliation than we'd ever done as a country, to do more on fighting climate change than we'd ever done as a country, to do more on fighting racism and bringing in gender equality than we'd ever done as a country. And over those first 4 years, that's exactly what we did. We did more on environment, more on reconciliation, more on gender and on fighting systemic racism than any government ever had in the past. But as you all know, there's always more to do. And all of you have to think about how, yes, you push for more. You push to do more. You say, damn it, you need to do more. You can't be complacent. You have to fight for more on climate change, more on equality, more on fighting Islamophobia, because today is the anniversary of the terrible killing of the Afzal family in London, Ontario, by someone who targeted them just because they were Muslim. And we have a world to change. And it's great that you are standing up to push for it, to ask me tough questions, to ask your parents and your school leaders and everyone around you tough questions. But at one point, you need to understand as well that you can be that solution. That if the world around you isn't bringing those solutions, you need to bring them in. You need to organize, as Gabrielle says. You need to bump up against municipal politics. You need to get involved in provincial politics. You need to make your voice heard and step forward to volunteer for a federal politician you believe in. And you have to know as well that politics happens and the changes in politics happen through government. And my responsibility as Prime Minister is to serve all Canadians, not just the Canadians who voted for me. And that will always mean listening to people you don't agree with and figuring out how to compromise in ways that keep people safe and move things forward. And it's messy. And it's far easier to stand there with a sign and say, make the planet safe again. Much harder to figure out how to actually do it. And that's where we need you. Not just to say, do it, but here's how we do it. And we're with you as you make those tough decisions. Because, as you may remember, we got elected in 2015 to do all sorts of big things, and we did all sorts of big things. But turns out you can't fix reconciliation in 4 years. You can't protect the planet in just 4 years. You can't end systemic racism in 4 years. You can make significant advances. But 4 years later, when we went back to the polls, young people said, and it's totally fair, you didn't do enough. That's right. So we're buckling down and we're trying to do more. But that's the reflection we all have to have. How can we push as hard as we can on the system to do more? And how can we be part of making sure we get more done? And the key is all of you to get involved, get informed, and keep pushing, but be part of the solution, not just telling other people, you better fix it, and we're going to shout until you fix it. No, no, no. You got to be part of fixing it. And today we're going to give the last word to my friend Gabrielle as we end.
Yeah, no, I just want to add something to that question because I think it's really interesting. I think one of the ways of learning how to change the world is to study how people in history try to do it. And not only by reading history, but also by art. Read poetry. I really mean it. Read poetry. Listen to music. Stay away from Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, because it's really addictive. I have Instagram. I use my Instagram and Twitter, and I used to spend a lot of time in WhatsApp and Twitter and all that stuff, and I got really anguished about it, but it's not worth it. It's much better when you read a poetry and you listen to a really good album of music. Not only Silverchair, I think of, I don't know, Bad Religion, or I recommend Against the Grain, big album. But try to think how other people thought they could change the world in other epoch. and that can inspire you in order to do so now, because as it's obvious, but it's important to be said, the time is now. Thank you very much, Justin. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.